Okay, so welcome to the third panel of this conference. This is a panel devoted to cities as drivers of democracy from a cognitive perspective. So we will have talks from the point of view of legal philosophy and legal theory with Chiara, Valentini, and me. Then from the point of view of cognitive psychology, with a talk by Luisa Lugli. And then we have, thank you for being here, the presentation of Eva Laskowska and Michalina Szafrańska from Krakow, who will present the work of the Future Law Lab. So we have 1 hour and a half, basically around 15, 20 minutes each, okay? And so Chiara will start, and then, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Sorry. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here today and to be involved in this project. So thank you to Professor Golino, Leonardo, Olivia, and all the organizers of this conference. So my talk is an introductory with respect to this panel. So I will try to provide an overview of the advantages of looking at cities and urban contexts as democratic orders and systems, but also the challenges that may arise, and that with respect to our contribution to this project, we will try to address somehow from a cognitive perspective. So using the instruments of experimental jurisprudence, cognitive psychology, and so on. What I will try to do is, first of all, provide somehow a description of what we understand by democracy according to the dominant approach, the deliberative understanding of democracy, and how we can apply this understanding to cities. Then I will try to point out, based, of course, on very recent scholarship around Hirschel. It's difficult to pronounce, but this is the name of this author, has pointed out that there is constitutional silence on the status and role of cities, which are seen as subdivisions, administrative subdivisions of the state, but not as autonomous political actors, even though they act as such, also at the international level. So from this, we can identify 2 orders of challenges. Conceptual: how can we conceptualize cities as democratic orders or subsystems within broader democratic systems? And normative challenges. Of course, there are many of these, and I will try to point out that the 2 main aspects that I think are challenging when it comes to cities as drivers of democracy, deliberative democracy, are democratic legitimacy in terms of representativeness, and on the other hand, equality and what has been defined spatial justice in the distribution of goods and services. Okay, so let me start by, of course, what is the deliberative understanding of democracy is very well known, but just to provide a very minimalist and basic definition. Today, the dominant view, I would say, or one of the dominant approaches to the understanding of democracy is the deliberative understanding. In particular, I think that the emerging dominant approach is the systemic approach to the understanding of deliberative democracies. So the idea is that a democracy is a complex set of actors, sites, procedures mechanisms of deliberation that are interrelated, interconnected. And deliberation has to be understood in very broad terms, of course, as an inclusive, transparent, and equal practice of discussion on issues of public relevance, involving those who are affected by the decisions that are to be taken, directly or indirectly through their representatives. So all the different components, actors of this system of deliberation are meant to perform their own specific function, and to display their own deliberative capacity. They don't have the same capacities when it comes to public deliberation, but each of them has some distinctive deliberative capacity. And among these components of deliberative systems, we have, of course, citizens' assemblies, parliaments, courts, schools, the media, and cities. In fact, cities, this is what the practice of deliberation has showed us in the last years, seem to be particularly suited as fora of deliberation because their smaller scale compared to the state allows for easier connections among the various actors involved in deliberation and the different components of this idea, of this deliberative system. So this scaled down environment provided by the urban context facilitates the interaction, or is meant to facilitate the interaction that is necessary for an effective democratic deliberation. This is relevant also because cities today host more than half of the global population, a figure that is expected to reach nearly the 70% by 2050. So this demographic significance underscores the relevance of cities and their potential as crucial sites of democratic experimentation and innovation. We have many examples of this. Cities like Porto Alegre was the first, but New York, Paris, Barcelona have successfully implemented deliberative governance models, enhancing citizen engagement and governmental accountability. Sorry. Tutto bloccato. So these are only few examples. There are many other possible examples that highlight the potential and the real and current efforts of urban contexts to drive democratic innovation by offering tangible spaces for democratic deliberation and collective decision-making. In this sense, it has been said that we are entering an urban era. But what is surprising is that despite this approaching urban era, our legal and constitutional frameworks are not yet fully equipped to meet the challenges that arise. It has been pointed out that there is a relative constitutional silence on cities, or better, a relevant constitutional silence on relevant aspects of the role that cities play in as autonomous political actors. This is a bit paradoxical because we have across the political spectrum, from Trump's America First rhetoric to Brexit to other populist movements, a fierce defense of national identity and local traditions, but cities remain largely invisible in many important respects in constitutional discourse. While we have supranational bodies, in particular supranational courts, adopting doctrines such as subsidiarity, the margin of appreciation to accommodate local preferences, national constitutions offer virtually no counterpart for cities. treating them as administrative subdivisions rather than autonomous political actors. So, based on this study of Ron Isher, out of 195 constitutions worldwide, over 150 mention municipal government, but only 9 warranty self-governing municipalities or assign them significant powers such as taxation powers, and none recognize cities as constitutional subjects in their own right, so as independent or autonomous with respect to the state. This is because national constitutions grew out of a seeing like a state mentality. This is what he says. And the result is that cities in the end lack the, in important respect, lack the constitutional capacity to exit or to bargain effectively. The force of their institutional voice is limited in some sense, which forces them to align with state or corporate interests and foreclosing their autonomy. So we can speak of urban non-status of cities in constitutional terms, which is relevant theoretical in 4 different respects. So this juxtaposition between the interest that there is in cities in political discourse and the absence of cities from public law debates. Of course, not everywhere, but this is a widespread tendency. The steady stance on sovereignty and spatial governance, important omissions in national constitutions regarding cities, and the tendency to conflate local identities with regional or national ones. Okay, so from this constitutional silence, which is noisy in many important respects, many questions arise. So what is urban democracy? How should we conceive it then? Can we have urban democracy beyond the state? What is the role that cities should play with respect to the protection of rights and political representation? How should we understand the separation of powers within the city? What is the role that the judiciary should play at the level of local government? Can we imagine something like, I don't know, a decentralized rather than diffused system of constitutional review, and so on? So we have conceptual questions and normative questions. Addressing them, of course, requires interdependent analysis, because we cannot have a deep normative assessment of these challenges without clarifying the concepts that we associate with urban democracy and its constitutive elements. So I, of course, will limit myself to just pointing out some of these challenges. First, I think the main challenge at the conceptual level is about conceptualizing cities as autonomous political agents. So what type of agency we can ascribe to them. The traditional concepts that we use within state-centered constitutionalism seem to capture only in part, okay, this autonomous political agency. And this is relevant also in practical terms if we want to account properly for what goes on in the political and institutional practice, because cities are increasingly playing an independent role, also at the international level. We have cities like New York and Atlanta acting independently of their national government, for instance, in issues of global climate governance. But we still have to frame and understand their action within this state-centered framework. Then we have normative questions. Is it legitimate for a city to act as an autonomous political agent? Of course, even though with the aim of fostering democracy and deliberative democracy in particular. There is, I think, one possible limitation to this legitimacy concerning the representativeness of cities. Indeed, there is the risk of excluding non-urban and in particular rural populations from democratic representation if we grant cities or mega cities this representative power at the international level, disconnected from, of course, from state-centered political and democratic representation. And then there is another question. A question concerning justice and the distribution of goods and services. Of course, urban democracy makes institutions closer to citizens and allows for the involvement of citizens on decision-making on how to distribute goods and services, but still there are some goods and services that my intuition is we do not want to fully decentralize. Think of, I don't know, the protection of fundamental rights, criminal law. We don't want urban criminal codes or something like that. So there is a problem of handling this decentralization, and the standards that we have, yes, the standards that we have elaborated so far, proportionality, subsidiarity, and these are procedural standards, and we cannot apply them without substantive standards, substantive normative judgments about what we want to allocate proportionately or according to the standard of subsidiarity. So this is not enough. We still need a constitutionalist approach to the decentralization of some essential goods and services. Which goes to the issue or question of, it has been defined, special justice. So the idea is that we should pay more attention to how urban spaces and infrastructures are distributed, organized, highlighting that equitable access to public goods and services is central to achieving democratic ideals. So it is not disconnected from that, but it is part of that. So just to conclude, I think that this means that we should move beyond the piecemeal approaches, constitutionalist approaches that we have been taking so far, that is dominant, and that requires us to focus on the state, but without looking at the constitutive elements of the state, among which cities, as autonomous elements that can contribute something distinctive to a democratic system of deliberation. So we need somehow an integrated perspective, integrating state-centered understandings of democracy with the idea of urban democracy, and also hopefully the rule of law. So a framework providing also some legal constraints designed for that. Thank you.
Oh, no. Thank you very much, Chiara, for this talk and for giving us this overview of legal theoretical problems about democracy and cities and the spatial element, the spatial dimension of ensuring democracy in general, human rights. So thank you very much. So I am in the strange role of being both a chair and a speaker. So I will try to self-discipline myself. So
I can.
So let me find my slides. Here should be this. Here. Good. So we move here. Okay, so thank you. First of all, I would like to thank very much Claudia Golino and Leonardo, Francesca for organizing this wonderful conference and for inviting us to be part of this project. And I want to thank Chiara for giving you a very good introduction of normative and conceptual issues related with cities, democratic transitions, and let's say constitutional theory, constitutional legal theory. So what I will do now is to give you an overview of a legal theoretical approach that I think connects well with what has been said to the problem of democracy and transitions, not from a normative perspective, so not from the perspective of the theory of democracy and the theory of human rights, but from a descriptive perspective. And this explains, I'd say, my involvement and that of Luisa, Lugli. We work together on this project, and so I will hope to be able to explain why we are in. So one problem is the normative problem from a legal philosophical point of view. So should we include cities in our constitutional theory? Another is the descriptive problem. So do cities play a role in democratic transition? So is there a specific role that we can find in urban contexts in enabling the transition from, let's say, a pre-democratic model to a democratic one? And there are several ways to address this question. Given that it is a descriptive question, can be addressed from a sociological point of view. It can be addressed from a historical point of view. Now, what I do and what we are trying to do is to address it from a different point of view, different from the historical and sociological one, which is partly legal, philosophical, and partly psychological. So I think that legal theory and legal philosophy in particular can help in this problem, because this is, in a sense, a problem based on the more general problem of how institutions emerge, how they develop through time, how they come into existence, how they transform. So this problem is connected with the more general ontological problem in philosophy of law. This is the more general problem possible when you deal with philosophy of law and when you enter the faculty of law. This is the first problem that you encounter at the philosophy of law course. What is law? What are legal systems? What are legal norms? And so on. This is a legal duty, of course. And what is a legal right? So all these problems are very foundational. Now, one aspect of this problem, how do legal institutions exist? This is really a mystery one of the main mysteries that has drawn me towards philosophy of law, because it is indeed very obscure how institutional and legal facts can be facts of our world. There is a strong difference, of course, between water and contracts and presidents of the Republic and parliaments. A strong difference between them, and the philosophical problem is, what's the difference? When you have water, you have a chemical structure, but of course, it's not the chemical structure of Mr. Mattarella that which makes him the president of the Republic. This is the difference between natural kinds and legal or social kinds. So the problem of legal kinds is an aspect of the more general problem of social institutional kinds. Okay, but this is the background, okay? This is what we teach in class. So there is, let's say, a paradigmatic answer to the problem of the existence of institutions. And this is drawn from social ontology, the idea of collective intentionality. In the previous talks, at different places, the problem of collective identity, collective purpose emerged. Now, all these problems are related from a philosophical point of view to this. So can we trace the existence of institution to the idea of a group which wants to support the rules of the system? There is a sort of we accept. And of course, there are several works in this field, tracing back to John Searle and so on, and more recent ones. But even before them, you find a similar answer to this problem in a classic of philosophy of law, namely H.L.A. Hart, the concept of law. Hart argues that the existence of law is rooted in a specific attitude of people, what he calls the internal point of view, which is an attitude which is behavioral and conceptual. So when people, and particularly legal officials, have this kind of behavioral attitude and this conceptual usage, they use a specific word, they enforce rules, they react, and they, let's say, support reaction. When people have this kind of critical reflective attitude towards rules, law can exist. Now, if you take this picture, now you should be able to see why we talk about the cognitive element. Because, indeed, both social ontology and Hart connect the existence of institution with acceptance, which means concepts, which means human cognition. And the same is true for Hart. If you want to have an internal point of view, you need to master concepts, which means that the phenomenon is at least partially also a phenomenon rooted in human cognition. So the traditional legal ontological question, how can legal institution exist, in this way becomes a problem rooted in minds, in what people do with their minds, how they conceptualize, think, how they think. So law in this regard is a kind of cognition. And this is why I was, let's say, hooked by this possible connection with cognitive psychology. Now, of course, this is not a new idea in legal philosophy. There is a long-standing, let's say, philosophical movement called legal realism, which argued that indeed minds, psychology are at the basis of institutions. But the fact is that the great scholars of legal realism, let's say both Scandinavian legal realism, Axel Egerström, Karl Oliver Krohne, the American realists, Jerome Frank, for example, Karl Ewelin, or even the Russian-Polish realism, Leon Petraszewski, of course, is the main figure. They engaged into psychology, but to my knowledge, they never made any kind of psychological experiment. So they typically drew from the psychological knowledge of that time. So what we are trying to do instead is to use the expertise and knowledge of cognitive psychologists and psycholinguistics to make real experiments about this problem, which leads us to experimental jurisprudence, a new trend in legal theory and legal philosophy, according to which conceptual issues, our usage of key concept in legal theory is, let's say, tested by way of experimental methods. And this is what we have been trying to do in the past years. So we published an article in Psychological Research, one in Jurisprudence, and on Scientific Reports. And now we have a print project about the rule of law and its cognitive underpinnings. So indeed, this is a long-standing research, let's say. So let me explain to you what we have been trying to do and why we think that this kind of method can be relevant for this project. So I will briefly explain the experiment that we made in the first and the second article I mentioned. So basically, we tested institutional concepts as opposed to other kinds of concepts, food, artifacts, theoretical. We also introduced a distinction between institutional concepts and meta-institutional concepts. This is a little bit difficult, but the idea is that basically the concept of a norm is more foundational, a meta concept, compared, for example, with the concept of a precedent or parliament. And the same goes for justice or responsibility. So institutional and meta-institutional concepts. And we have asked people to rate concepts, all these concepts, in a Richter scale going from 1 to 7 under these 16 cognitive dimensions. Okay, I will not explain all the dimensions, but what is important is, let's say that the basic problem was, how do you think that this concept is concrete or abstract? How do you think that this concept is familiar? How do you think that this is connected with emotions and so on? And experts in law, as opposed to non-experts, gave a rating on this. And this is what we found. Basically, we found that experts in law rate institutional concepts more familiar, which is not striking, with positive emotional valence, connected with more tactile experience, as if they were able to touch them, as opposed to non-experts. And this is particularly relevant for our purposes, more contextually situated. So experts in law, and you can see the dimension CA there, experts in law tend to find legal concepts more contextually situated than non-experts. Also, particularly relevant is the fact that experts in law, look at CA there, also find concepts like justice or responsibility or validity, so meta concept, very general and broad concepts, more contextually situated than non-experts. Non-experts typically tend to think they are not able to contextualize these ideas. These are the results, and the consequences that we draw made it clear that the elaboration of legal concepts have several dimensions: emotional, concrete, but also they are connected with the evocation of a context of application. Now, if this is true, and this is the main reason why we are here, and we hope to give a contribution, if this is true, then the problem of our project can be connected with this kind of research, because, of course, if the elaboration of legal concepts is connected with, let's say, the placement within a context, the problem becomes whether the difference between urban and non-urban contexts can play a role. So our question, the question that we saw at the beginning, becomes, does the difference in context, urban versus non-urban, have an impact on the way our minds represent concepts related to democracy, human rights, and the rule of law? So is there a difference in the concept you represent yourself that when you have to elaborate ideas like, for example, democracy? So this is not, to my knowledge, this is an entirely new question. I may be mistaken, but it seems to me that this opens really a new research project. So, for example, one could advance as a hypothesis, which seems plausible, but of course should be tested experimentally, that agents living in and mentally representing urban context tend to elaborate concepts related to democracy, human rights, and the rule of law more easily and more rapidly than those in non-urban contexts. So this is a bold hypothesis, a bold conjecture, indeed, but we have tried to make something similar, related with the concept of rule of law in our print project. So why not try to extend this methodology in experimental jurisprudence to our project in general? So we are now putting together the results of our clear project on the rule of law, and we found that, so it's a spoiler basically, we found that there is a cognitive cost for non-experts in elaborating the rule of law, a cognitive cost that it seems they do not have in elaborating concepts related to nationalistic models and autocratic models. So typically, for non-experts, typically elaborating concepts related with the rule of law requires more cognitive effort, is more difficult. Whereas, of course, if you are an expert, the relation is the opposite, okay? It is, of course, easy or much easier to elaborate these concepts. So there is a strong effect of expertise here, but what is striking is that this effect of expertise does not emerge when it comes to concepts like nation, like traditional values, connected more with nationalistic models. Now, what if the urban context served as an enhancer in understanding concepts like human rights or democracy or the rule of law? What if this were the case? Now, the consequences would be really striking, because, of course, you could argue about the role of the spatial context in supporting institutions. Now, cities would be indeed drivers of democracy and rights, not simply from a political and sociological point of view. Look, Of course, I'm not arguing that the psychological element is the only one which is relevant. This is not what I'm arguing. Of course, the sociological element is crucial. The collective dimension is crucial. What I'm arguing, and it seems to me that this is new, is that there is also an important psychological element. And can this figure among the explaining factors for some political outcomes? And what about autocracy? So Paul Blocher was previously rightly mentioning the fact that we should not fall too easily into the idea that cities necessarily are connected with democracy. Perhaps it could also be the other way around. Good. Now, can we see this effect? Can we experiment about it? So this is what we would like to do. Of course, we cannot do everything. So this is really too broad. So we can start scratching the surface, and we want to do it within a specific paradigm that is that of citizen science, more a kind of methodology which requires also the role of actual citizens, and this is what Luisa will talk about. So thank you very much.
Okay, good afternoon to everybody. I also would like to thank Claudia, Leonardo, Francesca for involving us to this very inspiring project and to believe that we can add some interesting contribution. And thanks also to Chiara and Corrado for talking about the theory and the applied aspects of what we try to do in our work package too. So now I have the space and the time to speak about more applied aspects. That is the one we think to do. So citizen science activities. So in a few words to translate what Corrado explained us very well in a more democratic research methods. Today, I thought to share with you this presentation titled Co-Creating Urban Transitions, Citizen Science and Humanities. And I think that we need to align our knowledge about citizen science. I don't know if everyone knows what citizen science is, so I would like to start with an example and some slides in which we could understand the concept of citizen science and some epistemological and methodological issue, and finally to propose some activity we can do in this project. Thank you. So let's start with an example from Belgium. Anne Webros, a doctoral researcher, and her team developed a citizen science project aimed to explore a novel method of citizen participation in neighborhoods undergoing transition. It has been implemented as a part of the municipal initiative in a small village, which actively involves citizens in the reflection on transforming the local church in a new community building. And at the heart of the project lies the Story Mapper, a placemaking tool consisting of a small drawing boards with transparent plexiglass that you can see in the image. These boards were distributed among the residents, enabling them to envision and depict the change they would like to witness in a specific location. The resulting drawings were then uploaded to a digital platform alongside stories. And this amalgamation of visual representation and narratives formed a living map where then were collected and were made accessible to all the citizens. And through the story mapper, these tools, researchers sought to provide an alternative means of gathering input from citizens, testing the hypothesis that emotional insights are best conveyed and shared through visual and in-place representations. This innovative approach, a citizen science approach, encourages active citizens' engagement and enables a deeper exploration of their perspective on the transformation of the neighborhood. So the aim, the goal of the following slides is to understand what is citizen science. The concept of citizen science illustrates its scientific and cultural value, contextualize the citizen science activity within the landscape of the humanities, reflect on some methodological and epistemological issues, and finally provide some ideas that you could possibly implement as part of Transitions project. Grazie. I would like to think about citizen science as a new paradigm for knowledge co-construction in the landscape of humanities. In recent decades, the production of scientific knowledge has undergone profound transformation. And among the most significant innovations in citizen science, a term that refers to research practice that actively and systematically involve citizens, that is, individuals, persons who do not necessarily belong to the scientific community, involve citizens in the process of knowledge production. This involvement can take different forms. For example, data collection, data analysis, validation, documentation, or even the dissemination of the results. So far from being merely a strategy for science communication or a marketing tool, citizen science represents an emerging epistemological paradigm that challenges the traditional divide between those who produce knowledge and who consume it. So citizens' contributions indeed are not limited to the passive collection of data, but may involve critical and conscious participation. This challenges traditional knowledge hierarchies and opens research to plural and context-sensitive perspectives. Citizen science is a model that fits within the broader framework of so-called open science, which promote transparency, open access to data, and active participation of citizens in decision-making processes, addressing the needs of an increasingly interconnected and engaged society. Historically, citizen science originated within the natural sciences. Consider, for example, amateur astronomers who report new celestial bodies, or bird watchers who contribute to monitoring bird population. But now is trying to gradually expand its scope, now playing an increasingly important role in the humanities and social sciences, where it finds particularly fertile ground. In the humanities context, citizen science can take on even more intriguing dimension, as it often involves, for example, collective or social memories, cultural heritage, or local knowledge. As I hope now should be more clear, citizen science is not a necessary activity, but we could think about it as a shift in perspective. And like any shift, it brings challenges. One of the first concerns is the quality and reliability of data. How can we ensure that information collected by non-experts is valid, There are, of course, strategy and tools, for example, training, protocols, cross-checking, but at a deeper level, there is also an epistemological question. Are we willing to recognize different forms of knowledge, perhaps non-academic, yet equally legitimate? Another challenge is that of justice in knowledge production. Do participants have a say in the aims of the project? Are they acknowledged as co-authors? Do they have access to the results? And finally, there is the issue of the relationship between science and society. In the humanities, we often reflect on how to make our work more useful, more accessible, more relevant. Citizen science is not the only the universal solution, but it can be one of the ways to build a more direct, more dialogical, and inclusive relationship with the world beyond academia, reinforcing the public relevance of humanistic research. So now, at this point, we can claim that citizen science is not only a method, but a cultural, political, and ethical challenge, inviting researchers to reconsider what it truly means to do research together, need to build a new pact between society and knowledge, where knowledge is no longer the exclusive domain of a few, but a shared and collectively constructed heritage. And invite researchers to develop new cross-cutting skills, the ability to design inclusive activities, openness to the complexity of different contexts, a critical approach to digital technology, and not least, a deep reflection on the public and social role of research. So, as we know very well, Transition Project focuses on the relationship between urban spaces, democratic transition, and historical memory, with a strong emphasis on citizen engagement. And this context, we thought, is a very effective context, is a very excellent context for developing citizen science activity. Aimed at co-producing historical, social, cognitive, and cultural knowledge, particularly in urban settings. More specifically, it focuses on providing the necessary tools for contemporary cities to advance and strengthen the rule of law and democratic consolidation. Key objectives include raising awareness among participants regarding the social or environmental issues addressed, fostering an understanding of the impact of their own action, encouraging the sharing of experiences with those too close to them, and emphasizing the importance of collaboration and social interaction among participants. So what we promise to do in our contribution to the project, so in the so-called work package 2, we promise to design a questionnaire in which citizen and university students were involved in order to investigate how the urban context helps conceptualize rights and democratic participation. So in the following slides, I try to outline possible approaches we could take with the questionnaire, and an approach itself, a question that could may take different formats. For example, open questions, so the more classical format of the questionnaire. For example, question like, how would you define the concept of citizenship, urban context, civil rights, or simpler but not so much the concept of city? Maybe we can have a very different context of this, a very different representation or representation of these concepts. Or can you share a personal experience related to these concepts, for example, citizens, urban concepts, civil rights? As regards the data, the output, the responses need to be analyzed qualitatively to identify recurring themes and patterns, and quantitatively to assess the frequency and salience. Another type of format we can use is the free listing task. Another commonly used task in psycholinguistics and in related field aim to understand how people cognitively represents a concept is the fluency task. In this task, participants are simply asked to list as many words as they can that are associated with the target concept. So, for example, please list all the words that come to your mind when you think about the concept of urban context. The responses are spontaneous, allowing access to the most immediate and salient association in the participants' knowledge representation. Data could be analyzed referring, for example, to the frequency, cioè how many times each term is mentioned by participants, indicates how widely shared or recognized an element is within the group, or referring about order, the position at which a term appears in the list, referring that words mentioned early are considered more salient or important in the mental knowledge representation, or referring, for example, about saliency, an index combining frequencies and order, in order to assess the centrality of each term. And furthermore, it is possible to identify clusters or groups of semantically related words that represent subcategories of themes within the broader concept of being studied. For example, in a freelancing task in which, for example, civil rights is the target concept, cluster, for example, like voting rights, freedom of expression, access to service might emerge. I would like to highlight that this kind of task can be particularly suitable for detecting and analyzing differences across groups by age, by gender, by expertise, by cultural background, because it is possible to see how the conceptual representation may vary according to different groups. And the last type of task we can use in the question could be the rating task, the one Corrado explained us very well, and the one maybe we are more familiar because we use this kind of task very often to review, I don't know, restaurants, hotels, and something like that. But in psycholinguistics, several traditional dimensions have been defined, such as familiarity or emotional balance, as Corrado said. But for our purpose, it might be interesting to select some newer or more relevant dimension aligned with our hypothesis. For instance, I report here the dimension of social metacognition, which assess how much we rely on others to construct the concept. So maybe answer this question. To what extent do you think you need to rely on others in order to understand the concept of citizenship, urban context, civil rights? So in a scale from 1 to 5, 1 to 7, not at all, or very much. So this could be, this could give us an idea of this kind of dimension. It could be very interesting in our opinion. Here, again, we have a numerical value. We could analyze data with statistical analysis, and also here we can again use the cluster analysis. It could be a very interesting kind of analysis that could give us information about structures or subgroups within the data. Furthermore, we can consider to introduce some relevant variables alongside this kind of task. So analyze data also take into account who is the participants. For example, divided the group by age or by gender. Gender, as we can so today is a very important variable in the project, but also by expertise. Citizens, for example, with expertise in urban planning, like architects, urban planners, civil engineers, or those particularly sensitive to these issues, for example, members of a neighborhood association, might express themselves differently compared to systems without this kind of expertise or connection. And this difference may emerge even at a linguistical or conceptual level, as those with more familiar may use more technical or structured language when describing urban spaces and rights-related issues, as Corrado show for our PRIN results, in which expertise play a very important role. Finally, and here I conclude, we can think about introducing an embodied grounding perspective. For example, we could first involve citizens in mapping urban spaces related to the exercise or limitation of rights. Citizens should be asked to identify and report spaces where civil rights can be exercised, for example, polling stations, squares, public assemblies, or where they might be denied or threatened. For example, public spaces with limited accessibility or area under heavy surveillance. And then ask participants to complete the questionnaire in these locations and assess whether physically being in these spaces could influence the responses. These are ideas, proposal. We have to think about it, but we would like today to put on the board, on the table, also this kind of thought in order to start to think about also this part, this experimental and applied part. So thank you very much.
So thank you very much, Luisa, for clarifying how difficult is what we have to do, but also how many ideas can be put onto the table. So now I'm very happy to introduce you to the talk by Eva.
Yeah, let's do this one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hope it works.
Okay, fine. So now
Fine, thank you.
May I stay here?
Yeah, obviously.
Okay, thank you.
Hello. Should I start?
Yeah, of
All right.
course, you have the floor. Thank you very much for being here and for
All right.
sharing it.
Hello. You know, the last talk in the panel is obviously the unlucky one because everyone is already bored and no one is going to listen repetitive presentations. So we decided to be a little bit alternative and decided in a way that we're going to divide our presentation in two parts. The first one, the catchy introduction, is going to be provided by myself. You'll see why in a moment. And the second part, the most interesting one, will be provided by my colleague, Dr. Michalina Szafrańska, sitting right here. So without further ado, the first one, the catchy description, why we are here and what are we going to do during this project and why this project is so important for us. I will just start right now. So we're both representing the Future Law Lab, and to show you the background of the Future Law Lab is required from me to say that the Jagellonian University, we both came from the Jagellonian University in Poland, Krakow, is one of the oldest university in our part of Europe, meaning mostly it is most traditional university in our part of Europe, obviously. So in order, as you may imagine, or as you may know from your own experience, sometimes for a traditional institution to evolve, there is a little need to be pushed. And the Future Law Lab was this kind of push or desire to push in order for our university to evolve and invite more interdisciplinary, innovative studies so that we are more open to the future while not forgetting about our past and traditional knowledge. In sum, or in general, or the official description of the Future Law Lab is that we deal with questions of interdisciplinary and law. As you may know, lawyers are mostly boring people who answer no, well, it depends. So we wanted to have more background, interdisciplinary background for our legal studies. And that was why the Future Law Lab was actually established. So swiftly going to the people, because that's most interesting part. The are obviously many people involved within the Future Law Lab, but 3 of them were assigned, so to say, to work within this project. The one is missing right now, so I will just start with him. That's Bartek Kucharzyk. You may have known him since he was often a guest here at the University of Bologna. He's lawyer and psychologist, combining his expertise within legal theory and psychology, some sort of combining or looking or searching for answers how to back the legal discipline or back the legal knowledge, legal theory with psychology and psychological science, psychology of science. So that's the Bartek. He's going to support us while we are going to provide a questionnaire in a few minutes. The second person, I'm supposed to start with her, Dr. Michalina Szafrańska, and she's too shy and polite to say, but she's one of our most prominent person at the university, or a scientist at the university, interested and specialized within social legal research. So she answers the question, and how the society deals with it, or what is the social point of view or social perspective of it, which is actually a question I cannot answer easily. And that's the last person speaking to you. That's me, and I'm supposed to start with my introduction. So sorry for that. That's me, Eva Laskowska-Litak. I'm directing the Future Law Lab, so to say. So the main point of contact and organizational contact. And paradoxically, I'm specializing in IP law, intellectual property law, meaning that I mostly can easily answer whether you can download illegal files from the internet. And the easy answer is yes, obviously you can, if you have used IP lawyer on speed dial. But paradoxically, my recent research was more combining the cognitive approach to intellectual property law, meaning what is the originality and how can we as a society or as an individual perceive the originality as a symptom of, more psychological or cognitive perspective to dogmatics of law. So that's the team. We are obviously supported by philosophers and psychologists and other sociologists. They're not here, but in case we need any help, that's the people who are going to answer or support us with their research. So what are we going to do? And I didn't want to repeat the questions and the presentations and the assumptions and theses that were already presented to you. So generally, the Jagellonian University, as the part of the consortium, is going to be responsible for the academic research with regard to the Polish perspective. It was already mentioned during the first panel and also during the second and now today, that the Polish perspective may be interesting to highlight the differences, the similarities with regard to democratic transitions or transformations, as mentioned earlier, and the rule of law, the EU values and the EU principles. Whether the opposition at the urban or regional level may be some kind of highlighting the values or the tendencies that emerge within the society. And that's our part of research. So whatever is going to be happening right here in Italy, while we're thinking and providing some research questionnaires, we are going to provide it also with regard to the Polish perspective. And I didn't want to really repeat and answer the question what was already mentioned by Luisa earlier. So we are going to participate within designing, implementing, and then starting the research question and this part of the project. We're supposed to answering the questions and assumptions asked earlier and presented by Corrado during our panel. So just easily skip to the slide so that the catchy description ends, and show you why the Krakow and the Krakow's perspective, the Polish perspective, is so important, and just give the mic to my colleague Michalina. You have to push.
Yeah, thank you. Well, Eva promised a lot. I'm not sure if I can respond to these expectations, but as you probably know or can imagine, this meeting is a starting point for us in this project and with this topic. So we cannot offer such an insightful contribution that you all did today yet. For now, then let me just share some of our impressions on Poland's past and present experience with urban democracy. Yeah, thank you. Polish cities have a long tradition of involvement in grassroots pro-democracy and anti-regime activities. They played, as you maybe know, a crucial role in the fall of communism in Europe, serving as the centers of resistance, activism, and political transformation/transition. And the presentation you see shows only a few of the most well-known examples of this activity. And these cities, along with many others, contributed to the broader wave of revolution across Eastern Europe and the start of shaping modern democratic Poland. And over 35 years of experience in post-Soviet democracy clearly shows that the role of cities as drivers of democracy still cannot be overestimated. It has been particularly evident in the last decade of authoritarian political shift in Poland. Firstly, in contrast to centralized and rather opaque national governance, we have seen significant progress in participatory democracy and greater transparency in local governing. Many deliberative and participatory innovations have been implemented, primarily in large cities, but occasionally also in smaller towns and villages. Secondly, lots of big cities have set up great institutional and political conditions for cooperation with NGOs and urban movements. Even so, many of them struggle to survive when they lost public funding for activities that central government didn't like. Many cities run projects aimed at supporting minority rights, promoting social cohesion, environmental protection, raising awareness about democratic principles, the importance of rule of law, all those values that have been challenged by the action and rhetoric of the populist government. Finally, you have observed on several occasions municipal support for massive anti-government demonstrations. You've probably seen that in defense of civil rights and free courts. Only these few examples, I hope, demonstrate that to a certain extent, of course, cities can act as resilient centers of EU values when national government fail to do so. This is probably because of their flexibility and responsiveness, of strong social organization and intellectual capital, significant social legitimacy of law and authority, especially comparing to national institutions. But despite these achievements of Polish cities in these areas, it is evident that there is still much to be done. And with Poland's experience in mind, we want to highlight two issues that actually have been mentioned in previous presentations. So it's good to know that we look in the same direction here. Firstly, we have been already, have been already said by Paul, among others. I'm glad our diagnoses are similar here. When we research democratic crisis and the protection of the rule of law, we still too often focus only on legal and political norms and institutions, and too rarely on citizens as the end users of the law. So we still know very little about what the law, the rule of law, and democracy mean to citizens, especially here in urban context, or how they experience these concepts in their everyday lives. That is why we are really excited about the participatory research planned in the project, as it is for sure the most effective way to ensure that citizens' perspective is not lost. And second, the last remark, I promise, when considering the role of cities in safeguarding the rule of law and promoting European values, it is important not to lose sight of the non-urban context. So this low density areas. In recent years, we witnessed an increasing gap in attitudes and lifestyles between city residents and those living in smaller towns and villages. This was striking in the last month presidential election, which, as you know, was again won by Eurosceptic and anti-democrat. Due to their diversity, cities have significantly greater bridging social capital, to use this classical Putnam's terminology, than homogeneous rural areas. Therefore, when we considering the role of cities in protecting EU values, we must also ensure that this bridging capital will be somehow transferred to non-urban areas. Otherwise, rather than fostering democracy, we risk deepening the already severe polarization of citizens. Yeah, so that's it from us. Thank you very much.
Fine. Basically, it's sorry.
Yeah, sure.
Here we are. So I think it's indeed, a difficult task, but we hope we have been able to explain the main objective, at least, of this working group. So one of the main challenges will be that of finding a common methodology in which to converge and to apply it in both contexts. So the Italian and the Polish one, and then hopefully not only to get a result, but also indeed to open further research avenues, because it is clear that this topic is very broad, and this is only the starting point. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Per una presentazione.
Io vi presento soltanto.
Ok.
So here we are for the last panel of our conference, which is mainly based on the long and mid-long-term horizon of the concept of transition. So we are reflecting on the theme of transition beyond the EU with lessons learned and future challenges. So we will see where all the reflection heard during the morning will lead us. I would like to welcome, first of all, Marco Abram from Observatory of Balcani and Caucaso. Thank you for being here. And then Fiorella Spizzuoco-Miriam Viscusi from Lo Spiegone, which is based in Rome, I think. Okay, thank you very much. And then Leonardo Pasqui, which will close our panel from Unibo. So I'm looking forward to hear what our perspectives, future perspective will be, and floor is yours. Please, Marco.
Thank you. Okay, maybe I have a presentation, but just a second. Here we go. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Thank you, Professor Golino, and everyone else who was involved in the organization of this conference today. I have a lot of, I got a lot of interesting input, and as Osservatorio Balcani Caucaso Transeuropa, I will introduce our organization in a few minutes. We are, of course, very pleased of being part of this network, and we'll really look forward to working with all of you in the next month. So our main task within the project is to organizing the hosting of a photo exhibition dedicated to the siege of Sarajevo during the Yugoslav wars. And we are going to host this exhibition in 3 different cities of southeastern Europe, which are Sarajevo, Belgrade, and Zagreb. And of course, to plan different activities around this, around the exhibition, around the hosting of the exhibition. So in the next about 15 minutes, what I would like to do is to briefly introduce our theoretical and methodological approach to memory, and in particular to collective and public memories of the experience, of the cities in the Yugoslav wars. And secondly, I would like to give you a quick introduction to the content of the exhibition from a public history perspective, and to reflect a little bit on the contribution we think this exhibition can provide to the discussion about the past in Southeastern Europe, and of course contributing to the discussion about the role of cities in democratic transitions. I must say that we are at the very beginning of the project, so please welcome everything I say as something very preliminary, but I look forward to feedback and comments. So, Osservatorio Balcani Caucaso Transeuropa is a think tank and is a department of the Center for International Cooperation in Trento. It is specialized on Southeastern Europe, and we work on many different topics, political, social, cultural issues, with a focus especially on EU enlargement, media freedom, civil society development, environmentalism, etc. But among the topics that we address, there is also the relationship between history and memory, and of course, memory politics. This is because Osservatorio was established just after the end of the Yugoslav wars, in a time when there was a growing debate about the role of memory politics in the wars, and I would say, a clear understanding of the fact that the way post-Yugoslav states were going to remember those wars had an important, or could have an important role in the post-war democratic transition. So what we do is that we try to monitor memory politics and deconstruct political manipulation of the past in many post-Yugoslav countries, but as like everywhere, I will say history is a matter of everyday political debate, in particular, in this case, promoting international narratives. We try to contribute to the promotion of an open and inclusive debate about the past, in particular, working with local actors, supporting local actors, NGOs, cultural institutions, media that are committed to dialogue and to the so-called process of dealing with the past. And moreover, I would say that, which is very important to us, is we try to work to include the historical experience of these countries into the European memory space. So how to counter the marginalization of the historical experience of Southeastern Europe, which is still in Western Europe so much influenced by stereotypes, cliches, what in the scholarly literature is called Balkanism, which is a Balkan version of Orientalism. Cities in this region were often at the center of the post-socialist and post-Yugoslav transition, not as places of democratization, but as military targets. Cities were besieged, bombed, devastated. Sarajevo is the most known example, at the center of international attention. The siege lasted for more than 3 years. But also before that, Croatian cities such as Dubrovnik, Vukovar were attacked and bombed. Then, of course, Mostar and its bridge, until the fall of Srebrenica and the genocide in July 1995. The destruction of cities during the war was more than material damage. Many scholars have seen it as a campaign against cities, against the cultural heritage of cities, against the historical evidence of urban, multi-ethnic and multi-confessional past. That's how the war ended up being labeled as an herbicide, attacking the very idea of cities as places where people coexisted in diversity. The war was also even labeled as a revenge of the nationalist countryside against the multicultural city, which is a binarism that it's definitely an oversimplification, because there were a lot of villages that were destroyed and a lot of multicultural resistance, also a lot of cases of multicultural resistance also in villages. So this oversimplification of this binarism must be discussed. But it's true that cities were military targets. Today, the collective memories of the cities, of the war experience in the cities is very complex, and it is also today is still at the center of memory politics. Scholars have recognized everywhere, of course, the commemoration of the experience of the victims, the citizens, the cities as victims, but also other dynamics. In Belgrade, for example, the memory of the 1999 NATO bombing has been recorded as a way of presenting Serbia only as a victim of the wars, avoiding any debate on Serbian responsibility. Some analysts have stressed how, in the case of the Croatian city of Vukovar, the memorialization of the experience of the city during the war the city was attacked in a very violent way by the Yugoslav army and the Serbian paramilitary forces, was used until recently to contest the use of the Cyrillic alphabet in the city. So something that was recognized by law as a national minority right. So in this case, memory somehow against democratization. But the memory of the war is also used to stress the role of cities as places that drive democratic, human, and anti-war values. And the main example is Sarajevo, where huge anti-war and anti-nationalist protest demonstrations took place in the spring of 1992 and are still remembered today as expression of the true soul of Sarajevo. But even in Belgrade, there are grassroots groups, not mainstream politics, of course, trying to rediscover the anti-war protest of 1991, 1992 that oppose the autocratic Milosevic regime. So we believe that the exhibition of the photos by Mario Boccia can provide a contribution to these efforts, to this memory work, I will say. The exhibition was realized by Osservatorio in collaboration with the Museo Storico Italiano della Guerra in Rovereto. The author is Mario Boccia, an Italian freelance photojournalist. He worked for many Italian newspapers. He was a correspondent in Sarajevo, in Belgrade, in Pristina, in Skopje, Baghdad. The pictures were taken in Sarajevo between 1992 and 1996 during the long days of the siege by the Serbian Bosnian army, and they were taken with a specific approach that I'm reporting with the words, with Mario Boccia's words. He said, "In my work, I've never wanted to take unnatural images. I chose to focus on the city's civil resistance, trying to convey the drama without showing the blood." End of quote. And I would like to analyze with you a couple of pictures that are in the exhibition. So several pictures show the urbicide and the dehumanization of the civilians of Sarajevo. In this picture, you see the destruction of the library of Sarajevo that was shelled in August 1992. It was a symbolic place of multicultural Bosnia-Herzegovina, a symbol of the heritage of all its communities, and it became a military target. Very quickly, civilians under fire, the everyday destruction of human and civic life. The civilians as targets is something that it was a clear feature in the Yugoslav war, especially in Bosnia. So this is a girl, her name was Bojana, and she was running during the bombing of Sarajevo. But as I said, on the other hand, Mario Boccia shows us the practices of resistance to these forms of dehumanization. So the cultural life of Sarajevo under siege, the concerts, the vitality of civil society, the attempt to survive as human being, the 3 years of siege, and even even the attempt to live a normal life. This little girl learning to use the computer, the new language of the time, the resilience of the population. There are a lot of pictures of kids surviving in Sarajevo in those years, and the vitality of the urban population of Sarajevo. there are a lot of testimonies of the vivid cultural life of Sarajevo in those years. And these pictures is very specific because it's showing the Serbian community in Sarajevo. So those who didn't leave the city, who wanted to stay in a multicultural city, and they are practicing during the siege in the Orthodox Church. So this is one important part of the exhibition. Another important part is that Mario Boccia decided to photograph also the besiegers, those who were attacking Sarajevo. And this is interesting because it's a contribution is a way to show how people committing crimes were normal people, so to speak, not savages from the countryside. So again, this binary vision of the city and the countryside is in an artistic way shown also here. The author writes, a normal person can dehumanize themselves to the point of becoming a sniper capable of shooting a playing child. Reflecting on this helps us to produce the necessary antibodies. So that's why he also tried to show how, the Serbian soldiers had wives and children and diaries, and he stressed, for example, the presence of a donor blood card showing how this person was even donating blood while being basically a killer. So and one more aspect that the last aspect that I wanted to stress that I think is very important for relevant for our project is the solidarity, the transnational solidarity that was shown during those years. The Yugoslav wars sparked a solidarity movement that involved thousands of citizens around Europe. And Mario Boccia witnesses some of the initiatives promoted by the Italian groups supporting the civilians in the city. And so there are several pictures about these experiences. And it is important to stress also that many initiatives evolved in city-to-city relations, city-to-city solidarity networks. For example, Bologna and Tuzla, Venice and Sarajevo, Brescia and Zawidowice. So reviving the memory of this experience of solidarity is important also really to better understand the role of networks among European cities in promoting democratic values. So I think that the exhibition will be an opportunity to discuss all these issues. According to public history research, art is particularly useful in order to engage audience, in this case, citizenship, with the power of this kind of images, the power of art expressions, but also to challenge dominant narratives and to produce new meanings, often emphasizing marginalized perspectives. We will try, of course, to relate to the different contexts, also to the current civic and democratic challenges in these three countries. And this is something that needs to be done working with local partners through, we are already in contact, we are already working with them, and through a high level of engagement of the local audiences. We are working with these partners to organize the first hosting in Belgrade, which is probably the most ambitious because of the difficulties of talking about the Sarajevo siege in Serbia. But for the same reason, it could be very important, a significant contribution to the process of dealing with the past in this country. Moreover, as you probably know, Serbia has been at the center of student protests in the last 7-8 months, protests that are asking for democracy, for the recognition of rule of law, for the respect of the constitution against corruption, and they are all spread all over the country, but they are centered in the cities, in the universities in Belgrade, Novi Sad, Niš. And it's interesting because students' protests are characterized by a plurality of views and stances on many issues. There are, for example, expressions of nationalism, but some episodes suggest that also that some sectors of the movement started to discuss their relation with the wars of the 90s, seeing reconciliation as part of the process of democratization. So we hope that the exhibition could work in this kind of environment, could provide some contribution. And the other aspect that we think is important is that today's protests in Serbia are also built on the memory of the anti-autocratic demonstrations and protests from the 90s. And those protests were also anti-war protests. And we believe that exhibition opening a discussion on the 90s can help the process of rediscovering the anti-war and even pro-Bosnian activism of civil society actors in Belgrade in the 90s as an experience of transnational solidarities among different European cities. And the last aspect, and I'm really finishing, women played a crucial role in these anti-war and anti-authoritarian protests in Serbia in the 90s. So we believe that that is another topic that we could discuss in connection with the exhibition, also because it's one of the topics that are central to our project. So these are some of the debates, but add all the input that we received today was very important. So we need to think more about everything we are going to do during the presentation, during the hosting of the exhibition. Other approaches will be, of course, developed in Sarajevo and in Zagreb, but again, we work together to find the best solution. So thank you again for having us today, and looking forward to work together. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much to Marco Abram. Thank you for bringing the perspective of the observatory to the discussion. Again, we are reflecting on the importance of memory, to importance of the identity, importance of images in building identity and building also democratization processes. And so really, thank you very much for your speech and for your discussion. So now I leave the floor to Miriam Viscusi and Fiorella Spizzuoco from Lo Spiegone. I can leave also the space here for you if you want.
Here. Yeah,
okay.
It's fine, yeah.
Which one is?
I think the second one. Can I?
Sì, perfect. Okay.
I hope you can hear me. Yes. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. So first of all, thanks for having us on behalf of Lo Spiegone. My name is Fiorella, and I will be presenting with my friend and colleague Miriam, but we are representing a smaller team within Lo Spiegone, and made of me, Miriam, Laura Santilli, and Alberto Pedrielli. And as you can see from the slide in the background, we will be dealing with the urban resistance practices and democratic transition from two different perspectives. And these two different perspectives came naturally, seeing our nature. So I will tell you something very shortly about Lo Spiegone, in case you're not familiar with who we are and our work. We are, so our journey began almost 10 years ago, but formalized as an online media around 2019. We are an online media, but also an association of social and cultural promotion, primarily based in Rome, but we are a bit all over Europe and Italy. So we are workers, experts of social media, communication, journalists, migration, and all our experiences somehow came together when we had to prepare this presentation, because it actually spoke to us. And the first theme that you can see here, so the theme that we chose came from our investigation of the landscape, the urban landscape where we operate, the city of Rome mainly, and then the role of journalism, which is of course what we do, the basis of what we do, and we do it under the lenses of slow journalism. So our core value is slow journalism and the need to slow down to do proper and accurate, information. So here, right? Okay, so as you can see from the slide, maybe we will lower a bit the tone of the overall conference today, but we started thinking about the themes and what we do. And the first question came out naturally: what can journalism do as an actor in the urban context to foster democracy and to somehow enact democratic transition processes? And the other one was, what can cities and urban actors do to somehow enhance and enact democratic transition processes? We also asked ourselves, what would Lo Spiegone do if it were a fast media outlet? As we said, we are a slow media outlet, and this set of images came out, and of course it wouldn't be the same. We think that information should be reflective, and we should take time to think about the themes and the things that we see around. We focus on international politics and international themes, but growing, we started producing other products. So we are not just we are not just writing articles and long forms, but we are organizing events like the one we will be having at the beginning of July in the framework of the Transitions Project. So the other question was, how can we bring an example of beyond the EU, so outside EU borders, that can somehow enhance the reflection that we started doing on the Rome landscape? And we thought about sanctuary cities in the United States. So just very shortly, because I'm pretty sure that we are all familiar with sanctuary cities and the US context. That's why we chose it, because it's an external context that somehow resonated to us as an example of something that we might be seeing in the future in Europe and in Italy. Sanctuary cities are not just cities, actually, but municipalities and networks of cities that in the United States are trying to counterweight and respond to the increasingly restrictive migration policies of the federal government of the United States. Of course, since the beginning of Trump's administration, the one that started in January, things have gotten worse for migrants and for people with different backgrounds in the United States. So we've seen the facts happening in California, in the city of Los Angeles, but also elsewhere. And this made us think a lot about sanctuary cities as an example of urban resistance. Because yes, sanctuary cities are possible thanks to the implementation and adoption of local policies that prefer to go against unjust federal laws that are targeting migrants, migrant communities. In this case, we're talking about this, but these are not, they are not just something solely based on policy action. What we're seeing is the action of the communities, and that was the element, let's say, that really interested us and sparked interest in us, because we've seen people taking the streets, as we said, for example, in Los Angeles, risking their own lives and sometimes being arrested to protect and shield people that were unjustly and forcibly removed from their homes. And we also wanted to highlight, again, maybe we all know this, but sanctuary cities are not breaking federal law. So the arguments that the government of the United States is posing are based on a false assumption that they are breaking some federal laws when they actually are not. And that was the interesting element, and the participation of people was also very interesting, because we saw networks and communities and people taking the streets. We saw class actions and a lot of activism, grassroots activism stemming out of the in sanctuary cities and of the current landscape. And we started asking ourselves, can we talk about something like this within Europe borders, and specifically in Italy, and even more specifically in Rome? Of course, we're not debating sanctuary cities in Europe or in Italy, because the context and the political economic context are completely different, but we are seeing something similar in response to what we call, let's say, a wave or restrictive policies, migration policies, also being implemented across Europe. So we are seeing movements of people, we're seeing, we're seeing movements of people, we're seeing activism, and as I said, cooperation and integration between different actors in the urban sphere, taking the streets and raising their voices to not just protect migrants, but also to affirm their will not to build not to actually destroy societies, not to have disgregated and isolated societies, but rather to have inclusive societies. And because it's proven by many studies, and here we have some positive benefits and outcomes of inclusive societies. We all know that a society where everybody feels safer is a society that thrives. So we know that people living in integration and cooperation thrive. There's economic growth, innovation, and there's improved social cohesion. So what actually interested us, and that's how we came not to a conclusion, but to let's say a preliminary conclusion, is that the cooperation and cohabitation of different realities in the urban landscape of Rome can bring positive change and can enhance inclusion mechanisms. And this is what we aim to explore, to further explore and research with the event we will be having in Rome at the beginning of July. Another aspect before closing and giving the floor to Miriam, that we analyzed is the interesting multi-level cooperation between actors coming from different backgrounds, but also different legal backgrounds. So, for example, in the city of Rome, we saw that we have many projects that are stemming out of multi-level cooperation. For example, international organizations, also UN agencies such as UNHCR, have implemented many projects such as the Charter for Refugee Integration that are actually possible just thanks to the implementation of inclusive policies operated by cities. And the actors of civil society, NGOs that are present on the field, and they do the actual work, that they are very close to migrant communities, foreigners communities, are the let's say the tool through which these policies and these programs are implemented. For example, as Lo Spiegone, we have collaborated with many of these realities like Baobab or Lucha y Siesta, that are grassroots organizations that provide shelter and a safe space to have migrants' voices heard in not just in Rome, but specifically in Rome in different occasions. And we will be talking and having an horizontal debate with these realities and to explore, to further explore how these actors can come together, and if we can talk about something that is similar to sanctuary cities and sanctuary municipalities that we've seen in the United States. And of course, we will further investigate the role of journalism, which is of course a key actor, and we want to know what the role of journalism is and how it can foster and enhance even more democratic processes. And that's about it. And I will give the floor now to Miriam to talk about journalism and the role of journalism and how we will investigate it in our event in July. So thank you very much.
Hello, everyone. Now I will specifically speak about the role of journalism because we are a media, Lo Spiegone is a media outlet. Therefore, the question that we started from was what can we as a media outlet do in this process? How can we relate cities and urban context and democratization and democracy, transition to democracy? And we try to develop like a vision that we want to further develop, also thanks to the event that we will host at the beginning of July. And we started, first of all, analyzing the context. So we are a media outlet, we're a media outlet in a context where we are in a crisis of the traditional media, which is not very recent, but let's say in the last year, in the last, let's say 2 decades, there was a very strong crisis of traditional media. First of all, with the internet, with the web newspapers and something like that. But today, this is even stronger because, for example, there is no need to go to read newspapers to gather information because it is very easily to gather information on the internet. It is very easily to get automatic replies from the artificial intelligence. So we asked ourselves, what can we do in this context? And maybe the one answer can be we can shift our function as journalists or as media professionals, and we can try to provide something, let's say, concrete to engage and to foster public action in the public sphere. And this is, according to us, a way to foster democracy and democracy transition. And how can we do this? We thought that we can do this by representing and engaging. So the first part of my short presentation will be about representing, what representation means to us. And the second one is the relationship between public opinion, which we suppose is formed also through the thanks to the role of media. And so the relationship between public opinion and public action. So how can we enhance public action through our role as a media? So representation, as Fiorella also said, journalism is, as well as the urban context, as well as the city, as today has been said, can be an infrastructure, let's say, an infrastructure and a tool to foster democracy. And representation means to us that we should, that we should involve the people, the subjectivities, the entities and organizations that normally are not included in the public sphere or in the public discourse. This is also interesting because some of these, let's say all of them, are also the same subjectivities that often are excluded from the urban space or are put in a marginal area of the public space. So the first thing can be to represent these marginalized communities, let's say, and representation also in another sense that can be more geographical, which is something that Lo Spiegone has done a lot in this work. Because, for example, Lo Spiegone has wrote a lot about areas that are not considered central in the European point of view, like, for example, Africa or Oceania or Latin America. So this is another sense in which we can understand the term of representation. Back to what I was saying, so for example, representing marginalized communities, representing and also trying to engage with people or communities that are not very represented, and try to understand what are their desires, what are their needs, and trying to put together these communities with institutions, higher institutions. So one thing we can do is to put together and try to foster their relationship, also their communication. Sorry, I'm just. And another thing that we think is important regarding representation is to be committed. So being committed means that is challenging the view that media and journalism should be neutral. Being committed means that, for example, committing to social justice, committing to environmental fights, environmental crisis, and challenging the vision that journalism should be neutral. This means also exposing injustice, holding power accountable, and all these things lead us to the second topic, that is the relationship between public opinion and public action. So, for example, the first thing, the more important thing, according to us, is to enhance public debate. So the role, what we think media should do nowadays is not just providing information, but because information is easily provided, but enhancing public debate. So fostering communication, fostering public debate, fostering ways to communicate among different actors of society, grassroots, underground, but also institutionals. This is something that we really care about, and is also something that we want to do on our events on the beginning of July. According to this, and after this, there is, for example, all power accountable, as I already said, and also engage communities, which means that, for example, this can be exemplified by media activism, which is basically it's very, I'll be very short, but it's like engaging journalists with activists. And so telling stories that are important to society from the point of view of people that already fight these kind of struggles in society, and not from a bottom-up point of view. Also being very horizontal, so engaging community, for example, asking communities what are their needs, what are their desires, what could be useful for them. In this sense, for example, solution journalism can be an example, because it's very focused on solving problems that are really concrete for communities. And of course, when there are solutions, when there are best practices, when there is something useful for society, one role of journalism and media outlets should be to share all of this, and sharing by, for example, public debates. So I'm going to the end. We will discuss all of this in Rome in our event on the 5th of July, which is called Urban Practices of Resistance. And it's basically public debate where we'll invite different actors of society. We will focus on Rome, but because we decided to focus on the urban context that we mainly know. And we will invite both actors, for example, from underground or for grassroots associations and organizations, and also institutions. And we will try to be like the medium between all of these actors, and try to develop a way to understand how media, how us, but also this can be replicated. How can we do How can we foster a change in society, and how can we foster democratic transition, starting from a very specific topic, which is migration, as Fiorella told. So this was a summary. Thank you, and thank you for your attention, and any feedback is welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Fiorella and Miriam. Stai in piedi. Thank you very much, Fiorella and Miriam. Thank you for your speeches. And they added another little piece of the puzzle, which is, I think, is very important. And both your speeches enhancing the role of the media and enhancing the spontaneous initiatives of the societies enhance another important perspective, which is the importance to fight the disaffection, which is, I think, one of the main criticalities even in mature democracies. So very important. Any initiative to fight disaffection, to build a real strong democratization process, engaging communities, and very important, it is also the importance of multi-level cooperation. So society, the institutions, and media too. So really, thank you very much. And then I leave the floor to Leonardo Pasqui, which I would like to an applause for Leonardo before his speech for the work. Thank you, Leonardo. Really, thank you very much for your fundamental work. So Leonardo is a research fellow here in Unibo. And please, the floor is yours. Sì, se no sto facendo... No.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Thanks for being here. Thanks for still being here after a lot of hours. Before we begin, let me thank also the PI of this project, Professor Golino, to create this space of discussion and reflection. And also thanks to Francesca Neiroz, whose care and precision make it this day possible. That said, since we are very tired, I think, what I'll do is present two stories coming from outside Europe, which tell us about constitutional transition, cities, and democracy. And for doing so, I will start by a sentence of a novelist, quite famous in Italy, I think, Italo Calvino. This is a sentence taken from a very well-known book in Italy, at least called "If on a Winter's Night a Traveler." And the sentence, you can see, I dare to translate Calvino, and forgive him for doing that. But the sentence is something like that. All places communicate with all places instantly. The sense of isolation is only felt during the journey from one place to another. That is when one is nowhere. I think that this sentence highlights the communicative and organizational power that cities can hold. When a city takes to the streets, when it protests, when it decides to expose itself, it is never just the one city. Almost instantly, other streets, other squares, other cities decide to echo with other demonstration, with other protests, and with other words. This is one reason why the relationship between democracy and the city is so close. As we were already seen and heard today by many brilliant presentations, cities play a crucial role in promoting and defending democratic values. And so the two stories that I'll present today, I think, could actually teach something to us, to the European Union, and to all of us here today. The first story comes from Bangladesh. Last July, in July 2024, a very powerful display of urban resistance in Bangladesh was set, and a student-led movement ultimately brought down Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina regime after 15 years of power. What began as a protest against the reintroduction of job quotas quickly escalated into a nationwide call for a regime change. The government repressive response, including inflammatory rhetoric branding students as Rajakar, which means traitors, and the use of disproportionate force, unintentionally transformed the protest. An internet blackout and nationwide curfew aimed at suppressing dissent instead created an atmosphere of fear, uncertainty, and rage. People adapted by sharing fragmented information through coded languages and face-to-face meetings. The movement combined grassroots protests with a sharp online presence using memes and viral videos to mobilize support, but also, and I think is very interesting for our project, the city was also used in a very material way, because during the protest, graffiti were used to communicate and organize the protest, highlighting the very material importance of city and its connection to democracy. A unified demand for Hasina's resignation soon emerged, amplified by the state's lethal violence. The killing of students, particularly from middle-class background, sparked widespread outrage and drew in new participants, including students from private universities, beyond traditional protest sites like Dhaka University. On the morning of August 4, 2024, thousands gathered at Dhaka's Shabak intersection, launching a civil disobedience campaign. The government responded with violent repression, causing hundreds of casualties. The following day, protesters defied the curfew by initiating the Long March to Dhaka, intensifying pressure on Hasina, who ultimately resigned. On August 5, so the day following, she and her sister, Sheikh Rehana, fled to India with military assistance. Currently, Nobel laureate Muhammad Yunus serves as interim prime minister and has pledged that Bangladesh's next election will take place in April 2026. The second story comes from the Korean case, the South Korean case. In 2024, President Yoon Suk-yeol declared martial law across the entire territory, claiming it was necessary to eliminate pro-North Korean and communist anti-state forces. This decision, the 17th imposition of martial law since 1948, but the first since South Korea democratized in the 80s and 90s, shocked the country. However, the martial law was withdrawn after only 6 hours, following widespread protest and a unanimous vote by the National Assembly. This brief but intense crisis projected citizens back 40 years to the Gwangju Popular Revolt of May 1980. This darkest page of recent history tells about a military brutal suppression of pro-democracy demonstrators. More specifically, in May 1980, the South Korean government launched a brutal crackdown on pro-democracy protests, imposing martial law nationwide. The next day in Gwangju, soldiers violently attacked students and bystanders near the National University, triggering widespread unrest. The violence escalated, culminating on May 21 with soldiers opening fire with unarmed civilians near the Jola provincial office. In response, citizens stormed police station and seized weapons. Gwangju was isolated, and while locals attempted negotiations, talks failed, and the protesters temporarily took control of the city. But after May 17, tanks and troops violently occupied the area. The uprising ended in a massacre, with estimates of 1,000, 2,000 people killed. And Democratic leader Kim Dae-jung was sentenced to death, also if later was pardoned. The memory of Gwangju, which played a fundamental role in catalyzing democratic ferment and spreading civic consciousness, remains alive through popular culture with films, but also, more recently, the 2024 Nobel laureate in literature, Han Kang, is actually the author of a very famous book called Human X, which tells the events occurred in Gwangju in 1980. So despite South Korea is considered a consolidated democracy, the VDEM Institute's democracy report highlighted a re-autocratization process under President Yoon. Yet the swift failure of his attempted coup demonstrated the profound attachment of the population to democratic values and the strength of active citizenship. Citizens, including students, everyday people, and elders who had fought in 1980s, gathered before the barricaded legislative building, acting as avant-garde of democracy. So what it shows, this story, is that memory, democracy, and cities is actually an inextricable nexus in the Korean legal order, strengthening one each another and highlighting the necessity of intergenerational dialogue for the protection of democracy. However, and I arrive to the conclusions, as already mentioned before by Professor Valentini, we witnessed a constitutional silence on cities, which became quite dangerous when we talk about constitutional transitions. As Heller, a German lawyer, suggested, constitutional transitions involve a crucial reequilibrium between normality, the lived social, territorial, and political reality, and normativity, the exemplary of binding nature of political action and legal frameworks. When a significant gap emerges where the old normativity no longer aligns with the new normality or vice versa, a short circuit occurs. The process that reestablishes this balance is defined as a constituent fact, which must be a diffused and popular phenomenon to hold practical and historical relevance. In the context of cities, the constitutional silence means that when such imbalance arise, particularly in densely populated and politically active urban centers, the constituent fact often manifests outside formal constitutional channels. The recent experiences in Bangladesh and South Korea illustrate this dynamic. In Bangladesh, the popular uprising, driven by widespread frustration and a unifying demand for a regime change, acted as an informal constituent fact, asserting a new political normality against a repressive normativity that had lost its legitimacy. Similarly, in South Korea, the swift popular rejection of martial law demonstrated how the normality of a democratic society decisively rejected an attempted authoritarian normativity, forcing a reequilibrium through collective popular action. These examples highlight how cities, as crucial sites of social and political life, became the places where popular will for constitutional reequilibrium is forged and expressed. The resilience shown by cities in the face of democratic backsliding, as seen in Bangladesh and South Korea, underscores so the urgent need for constitutional frameworks that acknowledge and empower cities as full-fledged actors in democratic governance. And I think that our project actually could help this kind of dynamic, this kind of phenomena, and more importantly, this kind of research, study, and events also with the citizenship. So good luck to all of us, and thank you.
Thank you, Leonardo, for your rich and inspiring presentation. Again, showing the importance of interconnection within the urban context, within cities. So thank you very much to all the speakers of this panel. Thanks a lot for your interesting presentation. I think we have many, many questions to which we can answer during the works of this project. So really, we will see where these questions will bring us. So thank you very much again. And then I leave the floor to Professor Federico Casolari for the final remarks. She's the head of Department of Legal Studies here in Bologna. Thank you. Thank you again to everyone.
So, we arrived almost to the end of the day. I liked the last words of Leonardo that say good luck to us. I think it was a nice start of our project, but we're not at the very end because we have the final remarks of the initial conference of our Transitions project, and we have here with us the head of the Department of Legal Studies, Professor Casolari, who is a member of this project, and I really thank him to do it today because I know that he's very full of engagements. So thank you for being here, Federico, and I leave the floor to you for the final remarks of this conference today.
Thank you very much, Claudia, for giving me the floor. And indeed, it's not an easy task to conclude this one-day opening conference for two reasons, at least three reasons, I would say. The first one is that you had a very long day, so I must be careful in, let's say, occupying time at this stage of the afternoon. The second reason it's related to the fact that it's difficult to conclude an opening conference, so something opening a project. So that's why I will try to give you some trajectories, so to speak, to continue our journey. And last but not least, it's difficult to conclude a conference I didn't have the opportunity to attend entirely because this morning I was not here. This morning we had a meeting of the University Senate, and I'm sorry for not having the opportunity to be with you, but this means that I didn't have the opportunity to follow some of the plans. But in any case, I will try to do my best, and it's really a pleasure to be with you and to share this challenging project with you. Some words, so I will try to give you some trajectories, so to speak, by building up some reflections on two keywords of the project. Transitions on the one side, values on the other side. So this is a project about the role of cities vis-a-vis democratic transitions. And it's clear, let's say, what kind of challenge cities are facing when it comes to democratic transitions, at your level at least. But we cannot forget that democratic transitions are strictly intertwined with other transitions that our societies, European societies, but not only European societies, are facing. I'm referring to the environmental transition, for instance, which has an impact on the way in which cities they are defining their, let's say, policies. If you consider the role of the cities in the implementation, for instance, of the Paris Agreement, it's clear that they are really a front line of the climate change challenge. And of course, these may change their role, their place in the regulatory framework, and also their attitude vis-a-vis the democratic transition. But we are also facing a technological transition, right? So we are all speaking about the role, the challenges, the threats of artificial intelligence services or other technological devices. And this has also an impact on, let's say, urban policies or the role of cities. without speaking about, let's say, the transitions of the international global order, which also have an impact on let's say, the urban policies and the role of cities. So this is to say that we cannot forget that the democratic transition is part of a bigger picture of transitions. And considering that I'm a lawyer, I'm a EU lawyer in particular, it's particularly important to understand the role of the law in governing and forcing these transitions. And when it comes to EU law in particular, a major challenge is the fact that it's difficult to foresee a change in the EU treaties. This is something that we discussed quite regularly at EU level. But if we look at the situation now, it seems quite unlikely to have a change in the EU treaties, meaning to have a change in, let's say, the EU constitutional framework because of the lack of agreement among the member states and lack of unanimity, basically. Meaning that we must face the actual transitions and crises or threats by relying on the existing legal framework, which means in turn that some level of flexibility is needed. And this is also a challenge in terms of democratic and constitutional, let's say, approaches. So we have to reshape, in a way, the legal basis we have. We have to reshape the institutional balance that is assumed by the treaties. And this may also change the way in which the member states and so also cities at a national level have to, let's say, reinterpret their role vis-a-vis the challenges we have. So, to conclude on the first keyword, transition, we are in a, let's say, a context of multiple transitions, where the democratic transition is one of the, let's say, several transitions we are dealing with. And this, in a way, is also, let's say, at the origin of an evolution, a shifting of the constitutional framework at EU level, but also national level, that may be reshape the role of cities. Then, of course, the other keyword is values, in particular EU common values. Values may support us as lawyers or as scientists in trying to identify stable regulatory frameworks. The values should, let's say, be stable in a way, meaning they shouldn't be so subject to changes during the time. So if we try to elaborate a regulatory framework which is really based on the values we share, well, these regulatory frameworks should have some elements of stability, meaning that could be able to govern in a stable way transitions. But of course, we need to share values. And we know that at EU level we have a problem in this respect. Of course, the EU values as we know them today are a result of a Europeanization of the values of the member states. So the EU values are in a way common values coming from the member states. So they are in a way a result of a bottom-up approach. They are coming from the states, also from the cities in a way, and they have created the identity, the common identity of the EU as a legal order, according to the words of the Court of Justice of the European Union. But once they become common values, common European values, thanks to this bottom-up approach, they, in a way, acquire a new status, a new life, a new soul, so to speak, and they are able, according to a top-down approach, to change the constitutional identity of the states. And in a way, they are also able to change the attitude of the other actors within the member states, including the cities. So the member states of the European Union are obliged to elaborate constitutional models that are compatible with the values of the European Union, as the values of the European Union are interpreted and understood by the EU subjects, by the Court of Justice of the European Union, by the institutions. And we know that the case law of the Court of Justice of the European Union is more and more focused on this dimension. We will have in the next few months a very important judgment on a case which is related to Hungary, where the court could say something very important on the justiciability of Article 2.2, so the article listing the EU values. But at the same time, of course, these may have an impact on the cities of the member states. And again, the cities are, in a way, the front line of the proper implementation of EU values, and also the front line of, let's say, the balance of different values at stake. So in a way, they are experiencing, they are confronting the problems that are related to the balancing of different values, the balancing between the EU values and national policies or regional policies. So cities as front lines of, in a way, the EU regulatory developments. This could be, let's say, a short expression that connects these two different keywords. And that's why the project we are starting, it's a very timely one, because the project will give us the opportunity to look at, let's say, the potential role that can be played by cities as part of this larger picture. Of course, when we speak about cities, we are, let's say, referring in particular to a specific dimension of local entities, local subjects of the member states, and we are speaking about a specific citizen of the states, the urban citizen, so to speak. We cannot forget that there are other local entities that have a role in this play, in this game, and there are other citizens that have a role too. In a way, the rural citizen, or the small villages, or the small towns in the countryside. So this is to say that we cannot set aside this part, let's say, of the picture, and I think we should be able in the project to include also the rural dimension, which is also relevant in a way, also in terms of building a common identity among the different EU countries. Some months ago, probably some weeks ago, 1 month ago, Armin Fogbo-Gandhi, who is it's difficult to define Armin, a philosopher, a lawyer, comparative lawyer, gave a speech here in Bologna about his last monograph, which is about European society. So the idea that the European society is the good society which is based on the values. And Armin said basically this means that a farmer in the countryside of Sicily should share the same values of a farmer in, let's say, the countryside of, I don't know, Munich or or Rotterdam. Okay, so this means that we cannot forget that there are also villages and other dimensions that are part of this picture. And probably in these small, let's say, entities, in these small villages, there are also the most relevant challenges for sharing a common identity when it comes to the EU values. And maybe if you think about, let's say, the UK referendum on Brexit, if you think about, well, some dynamics in the United States of America, well, probably you can understand that in the countryside it's more difficult to see, let's say, assess the sharing of common values, in particular to level common supranational values. So this is maybe something that could be added if I can just suggest to include something more. Probably to conclude, this project could, in a way, let's say, contribute to elaborate a larger reflection on the role of cities or towns on the international stage. International literature is now reflecting a lot on these. There is a bunch of international lawyers working on the status of cities as possible international subjects. According to the traditional, let's say, scholarship of international law, of course, it's not possible to qualify cities as a proper subject, so there is a constitutional silence also at the international level, to borrow from your reasoning, Chiara, because only states, of course, are the proper subjects in this respect. But there is a reflection due to the fact that cities, in particular big cities or metropolitan entities, are more and more involved in the implementation, but also in designing the policies, and so the legal instruments leading to regulation of specific, let's say, issues. So this is to say that there is already something at international level, in part also at EU level, about the possible role of cities as proper subjects of these legal dynamics. And I think that this could be another, let's say, dimension that this project could be explored. So, to conclude, it's a very promising journey, very promising we have in front of us. So really, good luck. I wish you all a good journey, and of course, thanks again to the organizer of this opening event, and I'm very much looking forward to the next developments.
So we arrived at the end of the start.
Yeah.
So thank you very much again to all of you, and let's look forward to the next event that we will have together, and to the single activities that are planned from here until the end of the project. So thank you very much again, and have a good stay in Bologna if you come from away, and to the Bolognese people, have a good night. So.